What happens when a girl who has spent her entire life scrubbing floors and washing dishes suddenly finds herself the heir to a vast fortune? A what if in the glittering world of wealth she never dreamed of entering? She encounters a billionaire who's used to everything, except the sincerity she carries in her heart. Maria had always believed that life had no surprises left for her. She was the kind of girl people overlooked, quiet, humble, always busy with chores in someone else's home. The city where she lived was filled with towering glass buildings, expensive cars, and people who never spared a glance for someone like her. Each morning, she rose before the sun, tying her worn scarf around her head, and carried her cleaning supplies from one wealthy household to another. She worked tirelessly, not just for herself, but for her younger brother Daniel, who was still in school. Her life was a constant cycle of service, exhaustion, and dreams she kept buried deep inside. Sometimes at night, she would look at the city lights twinkling far above her tiny rented room and whisper to herself, if only life had been different. But dreams were luxuries she couldn't afford. One of the houses Maria worked in belonged to an elderly woman named Mrs. Hawthorne. Unlike the other employers who treated Maria like furniture, Mrs. Hawthorne always spoke to her kindly. She would often ask Maria to sit with her after the chores were done, offering her tea and listening to her talk about her brother. Maria never thought much of it. She just assumed the old woman was lonely. But what Maria didn't know was that her kindness, her honesty, and her quiet strength had left a deep impression on Mrs. Hawthorne. And soon, Maria's life was about to change in a way she could never have imagined. The world Maria knew was about to vanish overnight, replaced by a reality that felt more like a storybook than her own life. But would she be able to carry the weight of this new destiny? The day Mrs. Hawthorne passed away, the city seemed colder than usual. Maria wept, not just because she had lost an employer, but because she had lost the only person who ever treated her like more than a servant. After the funeral, Maria prepared to return to her old, exhausting routine: more houses to clean, more doors that would never open to her heart. But 2 weeks later, a letter arrived. The envelope was heavy, sealed with a golden crest. Inside, Maria read words that made her hands tremble. To Maria Alvarez, I leave the entirety of my estate, properties, shares, and assets. For in you, I found the daughter I never had. Maria dropped the letter in shock. First, she thought it must be a mistake, a cruel joke perhaps. But the lawyer sitting across from her confirmed it. Mrs. Hawthorne had made her the sole heir to everything she owned. From that moment on, Maria's world shifted violently. Reporters crowded outside her old building, snapping pictures of the maid who became a millionaire overnight. Strangers who never looked at her before suddenly wanted to shake her hand, smile at her, or ask for her story. But amidst all the chaos, Maria felt strangely hollow. Wealth didn't erase the years of hunger, humiliation, and struggle. It didn't make her feel at home in this new life. Her brother, Daniel, was thrilled. Maria, do you understand? We'll never go hungry again. You don't have to scrub anyone's floors ever again, he exclaimed with wide eyes. But Maria only smiled faintly, still unsure of how to carry the sudden burden of fortune. The estate she inherited was breathtaking manors surrounded by gardens, cars she didn't even know how to drive, and bank accounts so large she couldn't count the zeros. But none of it made her heart race the way the simple joy of her brother's laughter once did. It was during the first gala held in her honor that she met Alexander Gray, one of the city's most powerful billionaires. The room was filled with silk gowns, champagne glasses, and chandeliers, dripping light like waterfalls of crystal. Maria, uncomfortable in a borrowed designer dress, stood awkwardly near the corner when Alexander noticed her. Tall, poised, with eyes sharp enough to slice through silence, he approached her with curiosity. "You don't look like you belong here," he said smoothly. Maria's heart skipped. She straightened her shoulders and replied softly, "That's because I don't." "Not really." Alexander smiled faintly, intrigued. He was used to women trying to impress him, showering him with compliments, eager for his attention. But this girl, this new heiress, spoke with disarming honesty. He wanted to know more. And from that night onward, their paths began to intertwine, though neither of them could yet imagine how deeply. She had inherited riches, but what she didn't know was that her greatest test wasn't the wealth, it was love. Disguised in the form of a man she thought she'd never belong beside. Maria tried to adjust to her new life, but each day felt like a dream she hadn't woken up from. The mansion walls were too tall, the silence too heavy, and the attention from strangers overwhelming. Invitations to dinners, galas, and business meetings came daily, and though she had the money, she didn't yet have the confidence to carry herself as one of them. Still, Alexander Gray kept appearing. At first she thought it was coincidence, his sudden presence at charity events. At art auctions, and even at the cafe she'd always loved but never expected him to step foot in. But soon, she realized it wasn't chance. He was seeking her out. One evening, at a charity auction, Maria stood quietly, feeling out of place among the glittering crowd. She wore a simple navy dress, far less extravagant than the gowns shimmering around her. Yet when Alexander approached her, he looked at her as though she outshone them all. "You know," he said, his tone calm yet layered with curiosity, "most people in this room would kill to have your story." Maria glanced at him, her eyes clouded with doubt. A maid who stumbled into fortune? That's hardly a fairy tale. It's just strange. But Alexander shook his head. "No, it's strength. Do you realize what it takes to endure everything you did and still stand here with dignity? Money can't give that. It's something you already had." His words sank deep into her heart. For the first time, someone didn't see her as the maid turned heiress. He saw her, the real her. Yet Maria couldn't let her guard down so easily. The newspapers had already begun spinning stories suggesting Alexander was only interested in her fortune, that he wanted to merge his empire with hers. Maria, having lived her whole life distrusting those with wealth, couldn't silence the doubts. Was Alexander truly different? Or was he another man blinded by greed? The turning point came late one night. Maria was walking through the gardens of her estate when she noticed Alexander waiting near the fountain. The moonlight reflected in the water, painting him in shades of silver and shadow. "Why are you here?" she asked, crossing her arms. "Because you're here," he answered simply, "and I can't seem to stay away." The raw honesty in his voice disarmed her. It wasn't rehearsed, it wasn't polished, it was vulnerable. Maria felt her defenses tremble, as though the fortress she had built around her heart was beginning to crack. "Still," she whispered almost in fear, "I don't know if I can trust you." Alexander stepped closer, his gaze locked on hers. "Then let me prove to you that you can. I don't want your fortune, Maria. I want the girl who found beauty in struggle, who raised her brother when the world abandoned her, who doesn't know how extraordinary she truly is. That's the woman I can't stop thinking about." For a long moment, silence lingered between them, heavy with possibility. Maria's heart raced. The heart always fears what it wants the most. Maria's fear was not of losing wealth, but of losing Alexander once she let him in. The days that followed were a storm of emotions Maria struggled to contain. Everywhere she went, Alexander seemed to follow, sometimes with purpose, sometimes with chance, but always with an intent she could feel in the way his eyes lingered on her. She told herself it was too dangerous. She couldn't afford to let her emotions rule her, but her heart was already betraying her reason. One morning, Maria stood in the library, overwhelmed by contracts and letters from lawyers, business partners, and investors who suddenly wanted her attention. She stared at the papers, but the words blurred together, meaningless in their complexity. "You look like you're drowning," a voice teased softly. She turned to see Alexander leaning against the doorway, dressed in a sharp suit but carrying the kind of easy smile that didn't belong in such a serious world. "I don't belong in this," she admitted quietly, frustration slipping through her guard. "These numbers, these decisions. I was a maid. I cleaned houses. And now they expect me to manage millions. I don't even know where to start." Alexander walked toward her, his expression serious now. "You belong more than anyone, Maria. You just don't see it yet. Fortune didn't make you who you are, it only revealed the strength you've always had." Her chest tightened at his words. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe she was capable of more than what her past had defined her as. But just as Alexander's words warmed her, the shadows of suspicion returned. At a gala that week, whispers filled the hall, guests gossiping behind jeweled fans and champagne glasses. They say Alexander Gray is only courting her because of her inheritance. He's merging his business with hers, you know? Clever man. Poor girl. She doesn't even realize she's a pawn. Each word stung like poison. Maria stood still, her hands trembling as her eyes sought Alexander across the room. He was speaking with a group of investors, his sharp confidence making him seem untouchable. For a moment, doubt clouded her vision. Was this what they meant? Was she simply useful to him? But then, as if sensing her turmoil, Alexander looked up. Their eyes met across the glittering room, and something in his gaze, something raw, unguarded, real, made her heart falter. Later that night, Maria confronted him. They stood in the garden again, beneath the heavy silence of the stars. "Tell me the truth," she demanded, her voice breaking. "Am I just part of your empire now? Do you only care because of what I've inherited?" Alexander's face darkened, not with guilt, but with pain. He stepped closer, his voice low and fierce. "Maria, if you had nothing, if you were still that maid cleaning houses, I would still choose you. Don't you see? Love demands courage. And sometimes the greatest risk is not in losing wealth or status, but in surrendering your guarded heart." Maria's world had shifted entirely. The girl who once scrubbed floors was now at the center of boardrooms, charity events, and flashing cameras. Yet, amidst all the chaos, it was Alexander who remained her constant, always there, always steady, always watching her with a gaze that carried more than words could ever express. But fate, as always, wasn't done testing her. One evening, a storm rolled over the city. Maria sat in her study, reviewing documents she barely understood, when the butler handed her an envelope. No name, no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "Do not trust him. He's after your inheritance. History will repeat itself." Her chest tightened. She dropped the letter on the desk as though it burned. Was it true? Had her deepest fears been right all along? The doubt lingered as days passed, creeping into every conversation, every look. When Alexander offered to help her sign a deal, Her hand froze above the paper. When he suggested she let him handle certain assets, suspicion clouded her mind. Finally, Maria confronted him again, her voice sharp with hurt. "Why should I believe you, Alexander? Everyone says you're here for my money. Even letters come warning me against you. Why should I trust you?" Alexander didn't flinch, didn't argue, nor did he defend himself with pride. Instead, he took her trembling hands in his and whispered, "Because I'm willing to walk away if it means your peace. If you tell me now to leave, I will. But know this, Maria, I love you. Not your fortune, not your name you. The woman who faced the world when it gave her nothing. The woman who taught me what it means to be human again." Her eyes filled with tears. No one had ever spoken to her like that, not when she was poor, not now when she was wealthy. For the first time, she saw the truth in his eyes, unwavering and unbroken. She broke then not in weakness, but in surrender. She wrapped her arms around him, burying her face against his chest. "I don't want you to leave," she whispered. "I just want you, whatever comes, whatever."